to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's Creation and Creativity, Learning to Trust Your Voice While Writing Your Story craft panel. I am so hyped to get to the creating, but first, a few things. Drop a hello in the chat while we get started. I'd love to hear where you're from, where you're at. And also, while you're there, review our anti-harassment statement, which one of our wonderful monitors will drop in the chat. I'm Alex Villasante. I am one of the co-founders of the festival. I'm also a children's book author. My debut, The Grief Keeper, came out in 2019, and I'm super excited that in 2020, I'll have short stories and 2 YA anthologies. The first, All Signs Point to Yes, which comes out in the summer. And the second, Our Shadows Have Claws, which is an all Latinx horror supernatural anthology, comes out later in 2022. I got to write some spooky stuff. I'm very excited by that. And today I'm super excited because I'm excited all the time to have 2 incredible authors with us. Honestly, I love their books so much. It's a bit overwhelming to be here with them. Well, with one of them, our lovely Maritza Moulite is stuck on a train. So she is making her way to a computer very, very soon. Will be with us in a few minutes, hopefully. But I just want to introduce her. I'll wait to introduce her when she gets here. But with me here is Francisco Stork, author of Marcelo in the Real World, winner of the Schneider Family Book Award for Teens and the Once Upon a World Award, the last summer of The Death Warriors, which was named YALSA's Best Fiction for Teens list and won the Amelia Elizabeth Walden Award, The Memory of Light, such a beautiful book, which received 4-star reviews, and Disappeared, which also received 4-star reviews and was named a Kirkus Best Book of the Year. If we took the time to name all of Francisco's awards, we would be here all day. Francisco, it is such a pleasure to be here with you. My first question for you, and this is a craft session, so we will be getting to some writing prompts a little later. But my first question is, it's a little simple, but also, a little complex. When you're talking about writing, what does voice mean?
It's both an easy question to answer and a very complicated one. Like what is voice? I guess when I think of voice, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is who I am, right? And the things that I am interested in and the things that I really care about, and how do those things become part of what I write, so if your voice is very, very developed and very you've sort of know yourself, someone could pick up a book without looking at the author's name and would immediately know that it was my book, right? If I have done a good job, and they would know that it was my book simply because of the tone, that I use, because of the type of characters that I write, but also about the type of things that I'm interested in, the type of concerns that are social issues or whatever. So one of the things about voice basically is consists of being true to yourself, right? So when you write something, you're not looking out there and saying, "Oh, I'm going to write a book just like so and so because they sold a lot of books." That's not voice. Your voice would be more like looking inward and saying, I'm really kind of questioning this thing about how love works. What happens when people from different social levels meet and fall in love, and so you really, how does that work? And you're really kind of interested in that, and that's something that you work on and develop. And so because you write about something that you care about, you're developing a voice. So that's kind of like I call it the big voice, which is kind of who you are as an author and how that is reflected in all of your work.
It's so true because especially when you're first starting out as a writer, if you're a kid and you're just learning how to write and wanting to express yourself, one of the things you do first is read other books and say, "Oh, I'm going to be like that." And I understand that because you want to sort of be like, you see something that is a great book that you enjoyed, and you want to write a book that's enjoyable in the same way, but sometimes you can get lost and not look it to yourself and the things that interest you and will really give you that author's voice, so like I think that's one of the, if you learn nothing else today, if you fell asleep in the back of the class, which I hope your teacher is watching, so don't do that, but if that happened, the one thing you should take away from this is that voice is about who you are. Like Francisco said, who you are, the things that interest you, the things that really just make you either smile or scare you, or that you just are really passionate about. That's like number one, the first step.
And when you go to when you ask a publisher or an editor, what is the thing that they look for the most in the books that they are thinking of publishing, or it is they will tell you, I want something that is unique. This word unique, which means that it's unlike all of the other stash of books and manuscripts that they receive. There's something about this particular book that just rings kind of true to them, and I think what they're pointing to really is the voice that is coming through, particular kind of real voice that is coming through what they're reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I started writing, I came from an art background, painting, and then I wanted to write, and I started writing and definitely did some of that copying of other people's voices. And only when I started looking at my family history, my background, where my parents came from, what it was like growing up in a bicultural family, only when I started thinking about those things instead of trying to emulate other things, did my voice really start to come out. But another thing about voice is that it is also about like really concrete craft things. So that could be like, if you're writing a character's voice, what's their vocabulary? What are the actual words that they decide to use or don't decide to use? Is this somebody who really loves big, like $10 words? Or is this someone who likes to speak very simply and not very much? So even those kinds of choices help create voice.
Yeah, I mean, now you're moving to kind of like the second level of what voice is, right? Voice is not only kind of who you are as a person, but also the particular voice that exists in a particular book, and who you and the voices of those characters, and so it's a lot. There's a lot of things about me that don't make it into the book, necessarily. Not they're not, my books are not really autobiographical in the sense, but they do contain the things that I'm kind of passionate about, and some of those things get put into the author. But when I do that, I have to transform kind of my voice from the voice of a grumpy 68-year-old man, without any hair on his head, to the voice of a 16-year-old kid somehow. And that's kind of like that's the kind of the craft, right? That's the craft, is to be able to create, to be able to transform your voice, what you care about, into the little voice that your characters speak. And there's really no other way of doing that than by kind of forgetting. You have to kind of forget yourself, and you have to become that 15 or 16-year-old kid, or whoever your character is. It's a little bit like acting. I don't know if you've ever acted before, but
no. I would be too terrified, but I know what you mean, because you have to sort of put on the costume of another person, but also, using your own experiences and your own memories.
Right. Yeah, you have to kind of become that how that person is, and sometimes those people are very different than you, right? Sometimes they're I've written characters who have a form of autism, for example, and I had to sort of like learn how they think, and sort of whenever I wrote something, and at the end of the day, I would look back at what I wrote, and I would ask myself, is that something that my character Marcelo would say or think, or is that something that Francisco Stork would say? And if it was something that Francisco Stork would say, I'd have to change it to something that Marcelo said.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens to me sometimes too when I'm writing two or more point of views, because I can be going along in this. Right now, I'm writing a book where one of the point of views is a character named Sebastian, and Sebastian has a very specific cadence to like how he talks. It's very like it's got beat driven. It's very like like it's full of slang, and he's like, and then the other point of view, Lou, is not like that at all. They are very precise in the words that they choose, and they are very precise in all the things they do. So sometimes I look at those two alternating chapters and I say, are they too close together? Are they using too many of the same words? They sound too much the same, because that's another aspect of voice too.
Yeah, I mean, and how do you develop that ability to, like, what would you think would be some techniques that you think would help a young person develop the ability to inhabit different characters?
I think that's a great question, because it's something that I ask myself. Alejandra, how are you going to do this? But I think reading your words out loud is a great way, because you can hear it. We're very used to hearing people's speech patterns and how those affect, like how we recognize one person from another. It's speech patterns and speech choice and word choice. So I read my words aloud. I just saw that, I hope that Maritza, yay, has joined us. Amtrak has let her go. Thank you for bringing Maritza to us.
Hi, everyone.
We're so happy to have you here.
Welcome.
I'm so sorry that I'm late, and I apologize on behalf of Amtrak. I saw the time keep getting pushed back more and more, and it's like, no, but I'm here. Hi.
We are so happy to have you with us, Maritza. I'm going to give you a very quick introduction, and then we're going to dive right back into creating your own voice. So Maritza Moulite, along with her sister Maika, is the author of young adult books Dear Haiti, Love Elaine, and one of the good ones. You can see one of the good ones right here. Maritza is a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, exploring ways to improve literacy in under-resourced communities after being inspired to study education from her time as a literacy tutor and a pre-K teacher's assistant. And her favorite song is September by Earth, Wind, and Fire, which I co-sign. Fantastic. So welcome, Maritza. So we were just talking with Francisco about what voice is, and we talked about like the authorial voice, the voice of the book, and then the specific voices of the character. But for you, because you write with your sister, what's it like to create an authorial voice, like the voice of the book, with another person?
Ooh, that's a fun question.
Threw you in there.
I know. Okay, so writing a book, yeah, I think that we cannot like say enough how helpful it is to be a co-author with your sister. That definitely makes things a bit easier than just working with someone else. So for the case of Dear Haiti, Love Elaine, our first novel, we definitely were coming from it's funny actually, because Elaine's voice was the first thing that we knew. Like we weren't exactly sure about what the story was going to be, but in our heads we came up with this girl who was very opinionated and sassy, if you will, and really intelligent and privileged and kind of distracted by some things, and like just couldn't help but give her opinion on something, or like even in her diary entries in the book, like she will say the shady thing she wants to say but cross it off to pretend that she didn't really say it already. So like those little things that make up a voice, like that is what initially drew us to Elaine, because she is so sarcastic and witty, and the way that she's so dramatic in how she just explores the world and what she sees. Like we were first drawn to that, and then on top of Elaine's own individual characteristics, something that Dear Haiti, Love Elaine really touches upon is that experience of being a first generation American, of being the child of immigrants and kind of having those responsibilities on your shoulders. Although Elaine definitely has it in a different way than we do. But like that feeling of like not feeling that feeling, not feeling, but that experience of not feeling like you belong in any one place exactly, or you're like an amalgamation of so many different people and stories and histories, is something that we have encountered in our own personal lives, which definitely helps. And then being sisters and having very similar upbringings and being really close in age as well has helped. But yeah, I think us being sisters definitely helps, because if we weren't, I could see this being a whole mess.
Well, that's one of the things that Francisco was saying earlier, that the things like the one of the things that contributes to the like the author voice, like the author voice that you have, that travels over books, or does it, is the question, that has to do with the things that we're passionate about in our history and the things that informed us. And I will never write a book with my sister, so if she's texting me to ask, the answer is no. I love my sister. But so that's another question I had, because I mentioned earlier that I wrote a short story for an anthology that's a horror story, not anything like I wrote before. And I was concerned, would my author voice come across on the page? And I think it did, but that's a question. Does the voice travel from book to book, or does it change? What do you think?
Me?
Anybody?
Yeah, go ahead, you go.
I'll start with Francisco.
No, I think that there's one voice that remains the same, which is who you are, your soul, and I think that that's going to come across throughout. And remember that I think the title of this talk is how do you trust your own voice, and I think that the word trust is kind of important. As you learn to trust your own voice. You feel in spite of doubts, you continue writing, you trust that voice. But also I think that your readers begin to trust you as an author, and they read the book and then they say, this guy is not going to hurt me, or this gal's not going to hurt me. So that trust is very important. But also but as Maritza said, when you're creating a particular character, that character has to become real, like a real life person in your mind and in your heart, so that you can write from within it. And that's going to change, from book to book. And also your relationship to that character is going to change from, sometimes I'm very close to a character, and sometimes I kind of create a little distance between them, and so I think that the nice thing about writing is that while you retain, certain things that are the same, you are able to kind of like shape them in to create an interesting book for the reader. Because I mean, after all, writing is not just about you, right? It's about hopefully somebody else at the other end who is interested in what you write.
Yeah, I definitely feel like as an author and a human being, I reserve the right to say that the authorial voice can change over the course of a lifespan and in the way that human beings change. But in terms of certain themes and ideas that my sister and I definitely keep coming back to in our work, regardless of the tone of the story or the mood, we are going to often be discussing like feminism in some way, or racial ethnic justice in some way, or or the idea of feeling like you're in kind of like a liminal space and kind of moving through the world. Like these are things that interest us and we're very passionate about. LGBTQIA plus community rights, like these are things that are important to us. So it shows up in our work and the words that we are using and the different ideas that we bring up, like that is shaping it. But as Francisco said, like in terms of like specific characters in the story, like those can change and they very often do. So like, even though we've been known to write like pretty headstrong characters, like that toughness is something that we find important, but like that'll show up in different ways. So like, if we think about like our main characters in Dear Haiti, Love Elaine, like if they were all dealing with like a bully or something, Elaine may try to read that person in that very moment and just go off whatever is in her head. And then Kezi in our second book, one of the good ones, would probably collect all the data information that would like prove that she is right and you are wrong. And then the language that she would use would demonstrate that she isn't above, like she's above this, and she's just, you're lucky she's taking the time. And then like Happy, who was also in one of the good ones, would probably say something like super reckless and hurtful to you, like in that hothead moment, and then like run away. So there are so many different ways to convey something that you might say is like headstrong or whatever, but in these, even the characters would be representing that in different ways.
I love that. I love everything about that. And I love that because I do the same thing when I'm thinking about the different characters in my book, but thinking about the authorial voice, that it can change and should change because as humans we change and grow. But like Francisco said, you want the reader to feel safe in your hands, and I feel like that's so important because it's not about am I going to be writing about the same topics with the same characters. No, but do they feel like they understand that when they come to one of your books that they're going to feel cared for and safe, and I feel like that's really important because and that goes to writing about the things that you're passionate about, the things that matter to you. For me, similarly, writing about queer topics, writing about those liminal spaces, that's really important to me and really something that fascinates me. And I'm sort of trying to unpack for myself. I want people who come to my books to feel that they can come here and know that somebody is really drilling down on these things, but also doing it with love. So I think that one of the things so it sounds like what we're doing, oh great, how do we do it? Like good, but what are the craft elements of how we get to that voice? And as Francisco said, trusting what's coming out of your pen or out of your computer. How do we do that? How do we get to trust ourselves?
I mean, one of the things that helps me a lot is, before is this concept of just playing with voices and playing with ideas and playing with like different personalities, before incorporating them into a book. There's a little notebooks that I use that are just kind of like, never, they're just musing. There are no rules. And so with it, I can try something in the first person. A character speaks in the first person, and then I have the same character say the same thing in the third person. And you're kind of like in a way, you're kind of like saying to the universe, okay, I'm here, I'm ready to receive, the inspiration that you want me to, for a particular thing. So it's not always up to you, how you, it's a lot of it is not just doing, but it's receiving. And so for me, sketching, like the concept of in drawing, there's of sketching before it becomes a painting, and using an eraser and trying again, I think is very important in terms of craft, for finding the particular angle to a character that's unique. And sometimes you write a character and it sounds an awful lot like something John Green wrote or something, and I say, oh no, I'm not I have to find my own voice, and so you try again.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's really, Micah is definitely wooier than I am, but I will say that like sometimes it really is like the universe kind of like sprinkling little dustings of a character into your brain as you're writing, and then you just kind of like transfer it onto the keyboard, into the page, or writing into your notebook and that sort of thing. But like it doesn't have to even like it can be like that, but it doesn't even have to be like that. Like voice is all about like what makes your characters come alive. And even though it's so interesting because sometimes, like when I'm writing, I just put down something, but then when I go back and edit, I'm really thinking consciously about like what I'm trying to convey with that character. And in those moments, like I'm thinking about syntax, like how is this character going to arrange these words and phrases that they are using, because it's different for different characters. I'm thinking about like diction, like what specific words uh is Kezi gonna say here? Like there's a difference between if your character would say okay or if they would say bet, which both mean the same thing. You are confirming something, but would they use both of those phrases in different scenarios? Like there are so many different ways that you can go with that. Um, and then also like sometimes you just like have to be free, like see what happens when you just write what you're feeling. So like what punctuation are you using? Are you the queen of the M dash? Do you love an
Yes.
exclamation
Oh,
point? Yes, I know. Me too. Like, do you love an exclamation point? Are you putting so many ellipses because you're drawing out every single word? You need somebody to stop and think about what you're saying. Like even in my sister's uh, group text, like even if we didn't have our names attached to the text messages, we would all know who is writing what. Me, because I have like a lot of typos like all over the place, and like my other sister like writes very like she has her commas and her semicolons and periods, and they're just everywhere. But like these are all these different parts of speech, parts of writing that you don't even think about, like that come together to make a voice, but they all cobble together. Like are you repeating certain words all the time? Like all of these things come together to make something. So it's not just one piece of your writing toolkit. Like it's really just being able to use, like take out your toolkit. I don't have a toolkit. Take out your toolkit and just like open it up and then like see all your different options and then like use them as you need them.
yeah, absolutely. I have a toolkit, but it's all in my head and it's very messy and like there's things all over the place and like there might be chewing gum in there. I don't know, but it's kind of a mess. But as we keep talking, I'd love to hear from our audience of any. We're going to get to writing prompts in a minute, so prepare yourself. We are going to ask you to write something. We're going to give you prompts. We're going to give you exercises. But in the meantime, if you want to drop in the chat anything that you have done that is useful to get you to find your voice of your character or your book. So it might be, as Francisco said, having that secret notebook that you just let yourself be and do anything, let the universe come to you. Or if one of the things that I do is I take my characters and put them in a situation that they're not going to be in the book, that just like a random situation. And I try, like right now I'm writing dual point of view, so this is particularly difficult for me. I put both of them in the same situation, and it could be like at the ice cream parlor and their favorite ice cream flavor isn't there. How do each of them react, and how is that different? Because people really do react to these everyday situations differently. So you want to sort of think about your characters the way that they are in the world, and how they interact. So what are some other things that you each do that you feel like, oh, I wrote this down really quickly while you were talking, and then I didn't say it. Now I'm going to say it. What do you do when you're writing a character that you don't like? A character that is not a great character, could be an antagonist, or could be just someone that's so different from you, but you have to, get them on the page and make them really sing. How do you do that? How do you get into that mindset? Francisco, you want to start
Sure.
with the hard question?
Yeah. I think Maritza really wanted to hit this one. I could see it in her face. One of the things that when I'm writing, when I know that I'm going to be writing about a character that I don't like, is that I kind of remind myself that this is a human being. Okay, so I'm going to be careful not to exaggerate the bad parts of this person that I don't like. So I have to kind of keep that in mind. Nobody. Well, yes, there probably are some people that are totally evil, but I don't want them in my book. I want people. Even the bad people that make it into my book have to have a little drop of goodness in them, even if it's just a drop. So that's it's to keep the humanity of the person that I don't like in mind is probably the most the most important thing. And also I think that to let them surprise you. I just wrote about a book about two young boys who hated each other, and one of them was clearly bad and the other one was was not so bad. And then the one that was clearly bad, as the book progressed, began to surprise me with these uh with how they weren't really totally bad, and it really, I didn't intend that part to come up, but I think that, but it did. So you have to kind of be open to what the bad person is like. And now I'll let Maritza who seems to be an expert on this.
That was really great. And I love the idea of like constantly remembering the humanity of the characters that you're writing. Of course, sometimes when you are writing about a Black Asian American teenage girl who doesn't feel blah, blah, it's so much easier to write that. I wonder where we're getting those ideas from. Like,
where do you get your ideas from? Incredible.
So that it's easy peasy, not really, but easy peasy. But then when you have those characters that you're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Or you are no good. It's still important to remember that like that character makes sense to themselves, unless they don't, but probably they are making sense in their world. So like, what is the reasoning behind their actions? Why do they think the way that they think? What are the experiences that they have encountered throughout their life to make them reach this point? Like, why is their personality the way that they are? Like, it's not necessarily the most fun or interesting thing to read if your character just is a jerk for just being a jerk's sake. Although sometimes I feel like there are people like that in the world. But very often, it's things that have shaped us and molded us to be who we are. So like thinking about those types of those types of moments, it helps. Even though sometimes you really are just kind of like gritting your teeth as you're writing the whole thing. And maybe you want your characters to be gritting their teeth in those moments with those characters too. But you want to make sure that you are like giving them justice and like really infusing just as rich of a voice and character and background and history and all of that stuff into all of your characters, not like just your favorite ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe in the first draft you can make them terrible and just like, they're just terrible because I say so. Yep. But in the next draft, you really have to do that. One of the things that I do is similar to what you said, Maritza, is that I think about the characters that I don't like, if they're the antagonist or just someone who's making terrible choices to themselves. They are the hero of their own story. If this book was from their perspective, they'd be winning and making all the right things and being quote unquote good. So understanding that will help you sort of flesh out a character's voice that, as you say, they make sense to themselves. So I just want to move away a little bit from the personal, like the specific, the point of view voice, and talk a little bit about finding your own voice as a writer. At an event, Pennsylvania Teachers Association event a couple of weeks ago, somebody came up to me and asked, they were Latinx, and they said they wanted to write a story about their family from Mexico, but they had never been to Mexico, and but their brothers had, so maybe they should tell a story from their brother's perspective. And I said, you have your own story. Your story is you never went, but you want to go, and you have your imagination of what that's like, and you're looking for information. That point of view, your point of view, is just as valid as that other person's. I think sometimes just realizing that you don't have to write like the poet X. You don't have to write like from that perspective. Your perspective is valid. So what are some of the ways that we can get people who want to write, kids of all ages, to trust their own instincts and to trust that their story is valuable?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it, because then I can listen to Maritza, who's so I can just relax after that. I mean, I think that you're touching on something that is kind of in the realm of the human, kind of like the big picture thing, and that is kind of like um that there's kind of an acceptance of yourself and of your limitations. Like uh I know what I'm kind of good at, and I know what I'm not so good at, and as I get older and as I keep on writing, uh I don't regret the things that I'm not good at as much as I stop regretting that, and I get more and more comfortable with who I am, and the kind of stuff that I write, and so there's a lot less comparison. I mean, I always think of like Thoreau, who said that a young man starts out wanting to live in a castle, and he ends up living in a shack. And so I'm kind of like in a shack, but I like my little shack. It's warm. A few people can fit in it, and so I think that kind of acceptance kind of translates itself into your voice, and not wanting to. It's not only about writing what you know, but it's really about writing. You can still imagine things that you've never seen, or even characters that different characters. But at the same time, I mean, you're kind of like comfortable in your own skin as a writer, and as a person.
I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I agree, like every single human being is fascinating. We might not be interesting at the same time, or we might not all be interested in the same things, but like we all carry so many things with us, so many ideas, so many experiences, so many dreams, so many desires and things that we hate. Like those all come together to make you who you are. So like you can use that as a jumping point when you write, or diverge from that totally. And I know that sometimes it definitely feels like only a particular type of story from a marginalized author can be published, whether that includes lots of pain, or if it's from a Latinx perspective, maybe you think it has to like incorporate immigration or all of these different things. Like, and that isn't the case. Like there's always going to be room. Like we have so much room for every person's story. And I think that's very important, while also acknowledging that sometimes it doesn't feel like you have that chance. Like even with Maika and I, like we kind of wondered if we would be able to write another Haitian book, like a Haiti book, because we wrote that first book and we felt so happy that we could do it. But like, would anyone want to buy another one about us? Like there's one already. You know what I mean? So I definitely understand the like the tension that you might feel there, but that shouldn't keep you from like writing that story that is yours. And if you have been on a panel with me or Maika, you've probably heard us talk about Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and her idea of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And like that is how she describes like children's literature. And when you're if you're a reader, you could be reading a book and it's like a mirror. You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like someone totally understands what I have been going through. Like this is the book that I've been waiting for. And we need more than one of those. And then there are windows that are clear that you can look at or look in and then see someone who is having a different experience from you. Maybe you can like get some of the different topics that they're talking about, or be like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that before, but like it's something that's new to you. And then there are sliding glass doors where you can like open that door and like cross through and walk with that character in their adventures. And that is so exciting. So like think about your work in terms of all of those different facets. Like you can write that book that to someone who has never been to Mexico or another country but wants to go, or is kind of grappling with the effects of like living a life here in America and knowing that you could have had another life somewhere else. Like all of those things, like that's important. And then other people who don't have that experience can look and appreciate the story that you're telling anyway, because it's a beautiful story. And then they'll want to keep going on the journey with you and your characters. So yeah, like I get it, but don't let that fear stop you from telling your story, because it is just as important as anyone else's.
Exactly. Like 100, just co-signing all the things that you just said, everything. But also that when you hear from people that they really want that unique voice-driven story, what they're asking for is you. You make that difference. That's the piece. That's the piece that, you know, and sometimes it's hard to really understand that. Like, why would my story, you're living your story. Like, this is boring. It's not. It's fascinating to other people. And that is really what makes all of the work that you do so wonderful. We have been talking too long and we have run out of time. I wanted to do a writing prompt in like right now in real time. We do not have time for that because I want to get to questions, but can I get a super quick, just a suggestion for a writing prompt from each of you? We'll start for Francisco and then we'll go to our student questions.
Yeah, my writing prompt would be, imagine that you are an old person. It's going to be hard for you to do that, but let's just try it. And you know you don't have much longer on Earth, and there's someone that you haven't talked to in 20 years. Could be a family member, it could be a friend, and it could have been for a variety of reasons, you know. And so you want to write to this person before the end of your life. So I think that, what would you say, and why haven't you written to that person? And the other thing to remember is that you have firmly believed that you were right in not talking to that person. Okay, for 20 years you have firmly believed that you were right. So that's my writing prompt for you.
Oh, that sets up some drama. I love that. Maritza?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so my first prompt was something like that. So I'll say this the second one. That's okay. So imagine that you're in the first hour of the first day at a new school. What do you see around you? Like, how do you feel? And what are you saying to these strangers who could potentially become your new friends or new frenemies?
I love that. I love the frenemy part, especially. I'm going to do a really, really super quick one that I use all the time. Imagine your main character got up in the morning and has opened their closet. What's in there? Describe what's in there and what they decide to look at and don't decide to look at. Describing a main character's closet and all the things they keep in there or don't keep in there always jogs my creativity. Okay, I think we have just enough time for some questions. Thank you. So we got Nora S. from 5th grade from Alabama.
How do you take boring information that would be important to the plot and make it interesting?
I don't know, Nora. How do you do that?
I know.
That's tough. That's the info dump, right? That's tough. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have to create some drama around it. You know, I think that somehow that information is going to end up killing somebody or getting somebody divorced or something.
Make it dramatic. I love that.
There's something about that information that is very, very important to the character's happiness or unhappiness. I mean, always relate everything to a character is what I would say.
Oh, that's so fun.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And that's a really great question. I think it helps having done journalism, like in that you have to take things that might be very complicated, but then like put it in a place that people would want to read it and understand. They say sometimes like explain it so your mom will get it and be into it. And I think that, and it's funny because in graduate school, it doesn't matter how, so I feel like sometimes it doesn't matter how boring it is. You just write it. But
The more the better, probably.
But I think that it's like incorporating it with like interesting things, kind of intertwining it, like making sure it doesn't feel like you're just like serving someone a boring plate of like spinach, although spinach is delicious, but you know. And that's where voice comes in, because like in those moments when you are telling something that is boring or, you know, kind of like setting up the story and all of that stuff, like that's where you kind of put in those like quirky idiosyncrasies of the character and how they would explain things or and that sort of thing.
That's great. That's awesome. Can we have the next question, please? It's from Otto E. from New York, New York.
Do you need to research for fictional books? And if so, how?
Oh, Otto. Yes, you do. You have so much research. Okay. Yes. How? Why are these students coming up with all these questions that I feel very attacked over? Francisco, do you have to research for a fiction book?
Yes, but I mean, like, for example, when I wrote a book about a young person in the autism spectrum, I had to do a lot of research to figure out how they think, and I read not only the technical books, but also read autobiographies by the person. But then my advice would be, like, don't overdo it on the research. I mean, once you know enough facts to kind of be realistic, then it's really your imagination that's important, and your ability to become like the character, and your ability to make it interesting. So a lot of people just spend years in research and never get to the writing part. And I'll just say that you know when to stop on the research.
That's a very good point, because that can distract you from the real work of the book. Yeah.
Oh
Look at this, Maika showing up. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I'm gonna take a screenshot of this.
Take a screenshot. Also, am I wrong, or is it Maika's birthday today?
It is.
Shout out to
birthday.
Maika. Happy birthday, love. We got you. Okay, so yeah, Maritza, what do you think? Research, yes?
Yes, we do so much research. I just got so excited seeing Maika. But yes, so much research. Sometimes it's something like really specific and minute, like, were pools chlorinated in America in 1936? And the answer is yes. But things like that. And then also, like, we sometimes were able, for Dear Haiti Love Lane, we went to Haiti and were able to, like, climb up a mountain to go to Ciudad de Lafayette, which is an important location in our story, and tweak things. And sometimes it's, like, important to be honest and be true to that, but also recognizing, like Francisco said, don't get stuck in the research and not want to keep going, because it's very easy to do that. But yes, so much research.
So we have one more student question left. It's just a text, not a video. It's from Ruby, 12th grade in Connecticut. And it is, if you could change anything about your journey to becoming an author, what would it be and why?
And holy cow, Ruby, how old are you again?
I know.
It's 12th grade, but Ruby knows what's up. That's
a
all.
Deep existential question, man.
Did I mention you have 2 minutes?
Oh, I think I wish that some of the things that I know now that I'm older, and some of the things that I don't care about now too much when I'm older, I wish that I didn't care that much about them when I started out about writing. I think I spent a lot of time kind of a little bit worried about what people would think of my work, and whether it got an award or not got an award, whether it's sold and not sold. And now I don't. I mean, thank goodness. It's become more of a joy, and just to write, for the sake of writing. So I wish I had done that 30 years ago.
Oh, I know I keep saying I love that, but yes. Just, like, I've always grown up knowing that I was a strong writer because I was a really big reader. But I wish that I had confidence to kind of, like, pursue this writing thing earlier, know that it was possible, like, I could do it, and not be so obsessed with like, some of the steps that it feels like you need to do to be an author, or feel like you're an author. But yeah, just have that confidence and be certain in it, I guess. And that, I mean, it comes and goes now, but
It's hard to do that. It's hard no matter where you are in your career. But I will say, if you're listening to this, take it from the three of us. You can do it. You absolutely can do it right now. All right. One more question. Thank you. What do you do when you feel stuck? Real quick, because we're running out of time and people are sending me very nice messages to wrap up.
I think that I just wait. I wait. I think that I have faith that I will get unstuck, or either I'll do something else. But but it's never failed me that I will get unstuck if I just wait long enough.
Oh, I love that. A lot of times I will procrastinate and then just do something else or talk it out with someone, probably Maiko or my other sisters, just to get the brain juices going. That might help. Who knows?
Thank you. Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you, Maritza. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you all for attending Creation and Creativity at the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. Please stay tuned for a video from our sponsor, Penguin Random House. Y mil gracias.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Hello, it's my pleasure to introduce Philippe Diederik, photojournalist and author of 3 novels, including the acclaimed Playing for the Devil's Fire. Philippe was born in the Dominican Republic to Haitian parents. He grew up in Mexico City and has spent significant portions of his life in Houston and Florida, all places he says he considers home. Thanks for joining me, Philippe.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I should introduce myself. I'm Andrew Carr. Among other things, I am Philippe's editor on the young adult novel I have the enviable task of talking about him with today, and that is Diamond Park. Now, Diamond Park is about a lot of things: Mexican-American identity, a once-in-a-lifetime vintage car, a very ill-advised road trip, friendship, family, and murder. But one aspect of the book that really stood out from me from the moment I first read the manuscript and before I knew anything about you was the story's settings and how your characters felt about them. It seemed to me that you had created this incredible cast of characters who had very complicated ideas and feelings about the places they considered home. So can you tell me a little bit about what made you want to write about these places?
Well, you know, I lived in a neighborhood in Houston that was in transition for a while, and I wanted to set it in that neighborhood, although it's slightly different in the novel. And I had a great sense of community in that neighborhood, and I was looking for that variety of the different levels of assimilation to the United States. So we have these characters that have different perspectives on each place, as well as what their place is within this country. And then later, obviously, in Mexico as well. And originally, when the story started, it was really just about the journey that they were taking down to the valley, which was just kind of a different space. And of course, things evolve as the story evolves, and I started seeing what their patterns were. When I'm writing somewhere around page 120, 130 or so, the characters take over, and I'm listening to them, and I could see their differences, and a lot of it, of course, comes from the subconscious, and I was dealing with people that I'd met and ideas that I'd had. Like in Houston, I had a friend who he was as Mexican as can be. He looked very Mexican. His parents were very humble, Mexican background, but he didn't speak Spanish, right? And I thought that was interesting, and he hadn't been to Mexico. So it's kind of evolved, and, you know, it has to do with some friends of mine, people I know, but it all kind of was working subconsciously. Then I saw, oh, look, I created this. Let me develop it further.
Yeah, it really comes across too in Magaña and Flaco's sort of low-level anxiety about their Mexicanness throughout the book, and then when they actually cross the border, which is sort of this weirdly unceremonious process where they can just sort of drive across into this liminal border zone space, which I, as a person who has never lived anywhere near the border, didn't even know was possible. Like you see this variety of you know, ways of being in this space, and it's something that as teenagers they really have to reckon with. Like, how does their Spanish sound? I mean, Flaco was born in Chicago. It's all really rich. That must have been a lot of fun and sort of invigorating to explore all that variety in the characters.
Yeah, and it makes me miss them already.
Yeah,
because I was crossing with them. I had these friends, and they used to tell me they got their papers in '87 when I think Reagan gave amnesty, and but some of the other guys hadn't, and they used to cross all the time. Like, it was perfectly normal to cross back and forth. I actually just had a message from a friend who was a post on Instagram. He was riding his bike from Alaska to Mexico City, and he was talking about somebody that he met that was telling him in Michoacan, in the state of Michoacan, about that now it costs $8,000 to cross over. So, but before it was $1,000 or something manageable. And so he asked him, he said, why don't you just open a business with that kind of money? And he said, if I open a business, they're going to extort the money out of me. The cartel is going to take all the money away. So what's the point? So there's the dynamics of crossing have changed a lot in the last probably 5 to 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's a really incredible, eye-opening part of the book, and it's partially because it's interesting to see how like Flaco and Magana, who've never really been on Flaco had never been to Mexico, and we don't really know like how much of Magana's can be trusted. Like they have this idea of what it will be like to go into Mexico, and then they go into Mexico, and it sort of upsets their own preconceptions in this really exciting way.
Yeah, especially Flaco, who hadn't been there, and he goes through, as the neighborhoods change and the road changes, and it sort of like goes through this whole evolution as they go deeper and deeper. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the landscape is just really vivid in the prose. It was one of the parts because I've never been to that part of the world either, and it was like I could see it. I keep talking about Flaco and Magana, and they're the two. They're sort of the two main friends in this group who we go on through the whole journey. And another thing that I really loved about this book is the depiction of their friendship and how they have a certain very recognizable teenage male friendship dynamic. But they're also in this really thoughtful, authentic way grappling with, not just Mexican identity, but masculinity, and like how they're sort of for each other, sort of performing, well, is this what it means to be a man? Is this how we're supposed to save their friend Susie? And the book really brings them full circle on that in ways that you totally shouldn't spoil, but that are really satisfying to watch. That must have been something that was fun to watch progress too, as you drafted the book.
Yeah, like I said, they kind of did a lot of it on their own, but it was, you have I don't know about you, but I've had these friends when I was in high school and even before that. Sometimes you wondered, why was I friends with this person later on? That's not the case with Magana. He's kind of redeemed in many ways through certain things that he does in the novel. But yeah, totally different. They're very different personalities because they also have different backgrounds, as you learn in the novel as well. And it's those sort of dynamics that we have with friends. With some of them, we have these very gentle, understanding friendships, and sometimes we have these other ones that they're just as good friends, but it's a little bit more combative, or you don't see eye to eye with things. And I don't think that with friends, we always have to see everything the same way. And that's one of the things that I like about those guys, is their banter and yet their loyalty to each other. They are their own family because of their own situations in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, that comes across so beautifully. I think we got time for just one more question. I'd love you to talk a little bit about your own journey to becoming a novelist, because my sense is that it's a little bit not the typical path to the book life, but here you are.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I was not, full disclosure, I was a terrible student in high school, especially the last couple of years. But in 10th grade, I had a good teacher, a good English teacher, and we read a lot of Russian short stories. And I got so into it, I read Crime and Punishment, and I wanted to read more, and that kind of really hooked me on reading on my own. And I would just pick out books from my dad's shelves that I knew, that I'd heard the name, that I knew were classics. And so for a number of years, I just kind of read on my own, not so much as an escape, but I just enjoyed it. They were great, reading was great journeys. And, but it took me a long time. I didn't go to school, I didn't go to college when I got out of high school because of my grades and because I was terrible at math, and I had to take remedial math courses. So I ended up not going to college really until I was in my mid-40s, basically, and went and got an MFA afterwards. And I wasn't even going to get the MFA. It was just that one of my writing teachers said, you should get an MFA. I didn't think I needed it. And it was just a great exposure to developing further and making contacts and making friends and really putting your work out there, instead of just having it in the computer. That was the big eye opener for me, was when I had to read a short story, in a presentation. It was, you want people to like your work. So then I realized, I'm writing for an audience. I got to be better than this, But yeah, it's been a journey.
That's such a great, I think that's such a great story and a great reminder that writing often comes to your life in an unexpected way. I think we're actually out of time, but that is a perfect place to end it. So thank you for telling me, for talking with me a little bit about Diamond Park, and I can't wait for all of you to read it. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
And